Welcome to episode 91 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week, we play Kentucky Route Zero's second interlude, The Entertainment. You can find all things Left Behind Game Club on our website at leftbehindgame.club, on Instagram at leftbehindgameclub, and on Twitter at leftbehindgameclub. If you haven't listened to our other Kentucky Route Zero episodes, you may want to do those first. You can find those episodes wherever you're listening to this episode. Saddle up with a glass of Hard Times whiskey, and let's get right into it.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have two friends with me. First friend, you know him, you love him. I call him the entertainment in my spare time. It's Michael Ruffalo.
I'm excited to talk about a very interesting episode.
And here to talk about a very interesting interlude in a very interesting game for the fourth time, Adam Iannetta. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Good to be back.
Today, we are talking about The Entertainment, which is the second interlude in Kentucky Route Zero. Now, if you're picking this episode up, the game is kind of non-linear, so you can listen along, but you may want to go back to our first episode about Kentucky Route Zero to know what the heck is going on. That is episode 87. You can check that out in our podcast feed, wherever you got this from. So, gentlemen, this interlude is a little bit different than some of the other stuff we've played in Kentucky Route Zero. What were your initial thoughts when we started playing this one? I'll start with you, Adam.
Well, as I mentioned previously, I literally knew nothing about this game when we first started the project. So I was very excited to be just pleasantly surprised however I could be. But with this interlude specifically, up until now, I had at least a hunch as far as how the game would at least play. It's very, it's the point-and-click adventure with dialogue-based text or text-based dialogue, and that really didn't happen here. I mean, yes, there was dialogue, but rather than what we had seen previously, there was no actual control over the dialogue. You were actually in the first-person perspective of this character known as the Barfly inside of a larger scene. I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I guess Cardboard Computer found out that we love plays, so they took one play and they put it inside of another play, so that we could watch one play inside of another play. And that's basically what it is. It's The Entertainment is the love child of Lem Doolittle, who is the playwright here, who takes two distinct productions, The Reckoning and The Barfly, and then mashes them together to create this new production called The Entertainment. And you play the role of the Barfly, who is, I guess, a one-act play or a one-man play inside of this larger scene, the Reckoning, which takes place inside of a larger bar. But what do you guys think, Michael?
Adam, I just have to ask. In the last act, I guess, that we played, or interlude that we played, we had found that there were actual real-world artists that were being referenced and interpreted here. Is the playwright of this play a real person, or is this a character in the game? As
far as I know, I had looked it up. I'd never heard the name before of Lem Doolittle, and I looked it up, and the only thing I could find was just references to The Entertainment and to Kentucky Route Zero. And I mean, similar to what we had done previously in Act 2 as well, I actually looked up, is there actually a drug called neuropropanol, or because it's actually copyrighted, and I looked it up and it just said, look here for Kentucky Route Zero references. But as far as I know, Lem Doolittle is not a real playwright. He might be. I've never met him, but just as well, you can definitely pick up a sense of other playwrights within this production, themes and narratives based on works by, for instance, Samuel Beckett. I was reminded of my grade 12 drama project where we studied Waiting for Godot, where the dialogue is so dense and so critical to the play itself, but upon first glance reading it, it is just nothing but word salads, just a steady stream of irrelevant nonsense that to me makes absolutely no sense. But once you actually dig a bit deeper into the text and the dialogue and the context, you start to figure out what's going on here.
Okay. Well, it was one of those things that I could never quite be sure whether we were, referencing a real artist or an in-world character. It sounds like the name of an in-world character, as far as my ear picks it up. But I came into this interlude so incredibly excited because the last act we had played was very Pynchon-esque as far as I, evaluated it. And the entertainment seems to me like it seemed from the get-go a really clear reference to Infinite Jest and David Foster Wallace. And, it's one of my favorite books. And I was like, wow, we are really getting close to it. And I think what I came to find out over the course of playing this is that it isn't, really a David Foster Wallace inspired reference as much as it does, rely on some really interesting dialogue and idiosyncrasies. But nonetheless, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was super interesting.
So on this series, I'm our kind of resident dumb entertainment boy. So I would imagine that you guys think that like I kind of hated this, but let me tell you, this is easily the best thing that we've played in the Kentucky Route Zero kind of game so far. I love this so much.
I'm smiling ear to ear. I'm like not quite surprised because I think this is like an enjoyable little interlude to play. But I am so happy that you enjoyed it, Jacob.
Yeah, I mean, at first, I won't lie to you. I was like, why am I in control of the camera? And my MacBook, my 5-year-old MacBook that I'm playing this game on, I won't lie, maybe had a little bit of trouble with the touchpad and also kind of the graphically intense nature of moving around a 3D space. But after getting over the what the heck is this, I immediately was very drawn into a story about debt, a story about Americana, and a story about a race in America. So no, very easily the best thing we've played so far. So I'm excited for a little bit more of your thoughts on it.
Well, the really interesting thing about this interlude, contrasted with everything else we've played up until this point, you really don't have the option to click and choose any options as far as, how you progress the story in this interlude. It's very much you're in the hot seat as the barfly sitting here, and all you're doing is making observations as far as everything else that's going on. You are literally the fly on the wall, just making observations as far as what else is going on within the larger scene of the reckoning.
So I think that gives us a good launching off point to discuss, what is the actual gameplay of this little interlude and what is the context of it. And we are playing the role of the barfly, as we've mentioned previously, in the center of the scene. And you have control of a camera 360 degrees. And in front of you is a beautiful bar top scene where Harry the bartender is talking to, do you remember the name of
Evelyn the patron?
Evelyn the patron at the bar. And Evelyn's initially talking about her husband who sells hammers, and Harry the bartender is, reassuring her that her husband being on the road is definitely not cheating on her. He's definitely an honorable man who's well liked. And you see this discussion go back and forth. And as you begin to rotate the camera to see what else is there, you see an audience that's watching you. And you can look down at the table in front of you and shuffle the ash in your ashtray. And that's pretty much your only interaction. And you really, from the perspective of the character here, are about navigating the camera to the different people who are talking and following the conversation as it goes.
I am not ashamed to admit that even now, I never looked down once at my
really?
table. I was looking around at the audience. I was looking around at kind of people, because it's a play, right? So there's people kind of standing off stage that you can see. And then there are also kind of text that's scrolling to show, like, here's the script of what's about to happen. And I think there's also a screen that's saying, like, that's talking about the critical praise of the actual play being done by the actual players who, I wrote it down, are in the Buffalo Street Student Theater. So takes place in 1973. And a fun fact, if you look at some of the credits for who was involved in this play, Lula Chamberlain was the set designer for the performance.
She strikes again.
Yeah, Lula Chamberlain strikes again.
Jacob, you don't have to feel ashamed about not looking at the table, because I actually never once noticed the audience behind me until the very end of the interlude, because I was trying to figure out, okay, how am I'm assuming this is the end of the play, so what do I do now? But the other really interesting thing, if you guys noticed, I think it was the jukebox off to the left of the bar. You can click that and get these sound files and references to what I'm going to assume are the audio files used from the earlier acts of the game, because it references like, tractor driving in the distance, or strange traffic noises or things like that. But then it also goes on to describe the whole premise of the production as the idea that every character is treated treated equally, and they have equal opportunities to forward the plot. And it also mentions the role of a dog who is also not there. And so at that point, I started to get the hunch, okay, is this play really just trying to personify what's going on in Kentucky Route Zero? Because that is very much what I've seen throughout the game thus far. You're not just playing as one single character. You're also taking on the role of Shannon or Lula, or even Ezra, the little boy. And of course, we now have this dog companion who is, for me, it's Blue, but it could be Homer, or it could be, I don't know who this mutt is. I've never seen him before. But the entire time, I'm just trying to I feel as if by the end of this game, I'm going to be in my room, surrounded by newspaper clippings and bits of string, just trying to figure out what is going on. And you see, it all makes sense now. And
you're gonna have your Pepe Sylvia moment.
Absolutely.
I don't know if it's worthwhile to dissect all of the little beats in the story, because I feel like we'd be here quite a long time. But I think we should probably go over, what happens in the play. So I know we've started talking out a bit about how Harry is talking with Evelyn. Is that her name?
I think so.
So he's talking with Evelyn and comforts her. And initially, I kind of got the sense that she was coming on to Harry, that she was kind of hoping that Harry would say, like, things happen on the road, or things happen when people are away, and that being the case. But I think as it moves on, you come to find out she's really just, insecure and afraid that her husband's going to be unfaithful.
I think it's maybe a little bit more than that. There is some really clever writing again around, like, the wife thinking that he's not only selling hammers on the road, that he may be hammering something else. But
I love that line. It was a great. It
was chef's kiss, real good. But I think that she also just wants to drink for free. Like, as simple as that is, like, she's run up a huge bar tab, and she's just trying to drink for free. So I think it's more than just her trying to fill maybe a void that her husband has left there. It's also she's trying to get cheap drinks.
Yeah, I guess I could see that too. It's definitely interesting, because slowly, as the story progresses, we find out that more and more people are in debt. And debt is, I think it's Pearl, who enters the scene about halfway through, who says something along the lines of, debt is suffocating. It's like the air all around us. It's like a fog that suffocates everyone. Because Pearl talks about being a person who works in a pawn shop that deals with short-term credit, and how everyone always spends more than what they have. So you end up finding that Evelyn has debt, and her husband has taken on more work to save their hardware store, and that's where the hammering or selling hammers comes in. And then Pearl comes along, and she says, well, I know I owe you a big bar tab, Harry, but I'm going to need you to put a pause on that. And then it all comes full circle when Pearl's family comes in, and they want to celebrate momentous achievement of the women in the Slade family getting promotions and wanting to add it to their tab. And Harry tries to slow walk them all.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I just want to add on to that is that, there's a lot of writing in there around race and around kind of the American dream, if you will, too. I think that one of the kind of big pieces that stuck with me is that Pearl is a person of color, and what she had said is that, like, I work in the pawn shop, and I'm being employed to make what I'm doing more palatable for those that are getting secured loans and payday advances. I think the exact line, I wrote it down, was black coffee and desperation. It's kind of the feeling in the pawn shop around what she's doing. That line just really stuck with me. And the big thing with the Slade women is that, the husband, whose name is Lawrence, he's like, yeah, everyone's going to get promoted. Like, Rosa, you're going to get promoted. It's going to be fine, even though it's literally just...
Your management material.
Yeah, your management material, even though it's literally just like, he said maybe one day that I would be ready for management, but not today. But even that little, like, glimmer of hope was enough to have these folks in small town America just cheer out and drink way too much.
There's a line that I think it's Harry says at one point, that there is no money in lending, but there is money in usury. And then he goes on to say, I'm pretty sure that's from the Bible. And I just thought, what? But it's there's. And as we've already discussed, not just in this episode, but in other chapters previously, there is such a heavy theme about debt and owing others things that you don't have the ability to repay them with. And even at one point, Larry goes on to talk about how there's a new kind of debt that I guess the suppliers of this bar, are they the Hard Time Boys? Because they provide Hard Time whiskey, which is apparently the only alcohol that they're able to serve in this bar. But he goes on to talk about this new kind of debt, and he never really explains it, at least not well enough for me to understand what he's talking about. But there's definitely a very dark, false sense of comfort in this bar, but as are most speakeasies and saloons of this kind, I'm sure.
Yeah, I feel like without jumping ahead too much, we find out in the very end what the hard time situation is, and very early on, as Jacob said, everyone just wants to drink. Everyone wants to get there. And I think one of the really cool things about this is throughout the play, or throughout the interlude, we see the dialogue become more drunken, more, I don't want to say open and honest, but definitely more frank and cutting. And Harry, who would be one of their favorites, they start calling him out because he talks about how he went on vacation and saw a hostess, and he was thinking about getting a hostess here because he enjoyed having a hostess there, and he slips up and he says that he was in New Orleans by the beach, or maybe it was a pool, and they just stick on the fact that he can't remember whether it was a pool or whether it was a beach, and that it was both, and that he was in the Everglades near a swamp, and it was one thing after another. And this it's kind of surreal along the way, because if you ever look down, which it sounds like you didn't, or if you look over to the other tables, there are these really weird bread brick sandwiches where it's a slice of bread, a brick in between, like a red brick that you would brick a wall with, and then a piece of bread on top, and it just it stuck out, and I couldn't put any context to it. I couldn't figure out what it meant, but it was very surreal, like Kentucky Route Zero happens to be.
Let me try and like interpret what the sandwich is, because they mention Rain's Law a lot. Did you guys hear them talk about Rain's Law?
No, I didn't.
So,
what is it?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, so throughout, they once or twice they just mention Rain's Law, which is just like it's a New York law that was put in like the 1800s, which essentially is a liquor tax, but also ensures that you have to serve a meal if you serve drinks on a Sunday. So my interpretation was like, oh, because of Rain's Law, because they have to serve food, like he's maybe just serving like the worst thing. But in 1902, I'm reading the Wikipedia page. It was written that saloon keepers mocked the law by setting brick sandwiches out, which is 2 pieces of bread with a brick in between, which legally fulfills the requirement of serving food.
That's so good.
So very good. One thing I just wanted to pick up on very quickly was one of you guys mentioned hard times, and how they maybe used a special process or used a special wood in the making of their whiskey. Immediately I went to, okay, maybe we're now talking about psychoactive drugs, because I don't know if some plants or some woods like have psychoactive drugs or are psychoactive or have properties of psychoactive drugs. So my immediate thought was like, oh, they're talking about drugs again. But like, that's always my Kentucky Route Zero theory, is drugs.
Drugs tend to make Kentucky Route Zero make a whole lot more sense. But I think the Hard Times liquor falls into the debt especially well, because it's been alluded to so far multiple times, the Hard Times boys, and how they are way more ominous than it just sounds. And in this case, like, obviously everyone here is falling on hard times, and the only thing left that they can drink when no one else will supply this bar is Hard Time whiskey. And Harold, that's the bartender's name, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think they call him Harry.
Harry.
His name is Harold.
Yeah. So when Harry says, like, there's a new type of debt, I think he's referring to the fact that the Hard Time liquor, or the Hard Time whiskey, is the only thing he can get. And at the very end, he says, I sold your debt, I sold your tabs to the Hard Time boys, and they're going to be coming to collect. And it just has this really sharp underlying like point that things are going to get real bad, and that these guys are probably really used to it, because this, it's kind of built into the name. These guys are ready for hard times.
The repo men are here
exactly.
to collect.
I don't know if I want to jump to kind of the last frame, but when the Hard Times kind of reveal happens, it scared the pants off me.
Really?
You are among friends there.
Do you want to...
Well, okay, so why? Unpack it for me.
So we're going through the scene. So imagine that this play is, maybe 4 or 5 acts long, where, new characters come in and they're talking about Harry's trip, and Pearl and Rosa and Lawrence are talking about the promotion at the grocery store, blah, blah, blah. The reveal happens that Harry traded everyone's debts away, because it seems like work is tough, money is tough, people want to drink, but so everyone has a tab to pay at the bar, and Harry's like, I'm sorry, I'm the one that sold your tab away. All that the Hard Time boys want is your debt. They feed on it. They put it in the whiskey, is the exact line that's kind of shared. And you turn around, because there's this like really low hum that happens. You turn around and there's this like glowing man, full bodied, that's yellow and green. And he just is standing there. And the hum gets very loud. And I like tore off my headphones because it got so loud, and it scared the pants off me.
I totally forgot about
how?
That. And I didn't put 2 and 2 together.
How?
I was deeply unsettled by it, but I was enjoying so much of that, of the play, I guess. So much of the dialogue and the relationships and unpacking everything that they were talking about, the religious references and the allusions to, what type of Christian you are. I was enjoying so much of that I completely did not put 2 and 2 together that was the Hard Time boys, or that was one of the Hard Time boys when they come in and have that experience at the end. I just was thinking more about the stuff that I enjoyed and not the stuff that scarred me. I pushed the negative thoughts out.
I actually didn't realize that this character is supposed to represent the Hard Times boy, or Hard Times boy, or whatever it is, because I wrote down in my notes, what the hell is up with this usher? Because he's standing there in the middle of the aisleway into the audience, and he's got this clipboard, and I just kind of thought, okay, I guess the show's over, it's like you said, Jacob, this neon phosphorescent skeleton-like creature, just like emanating electricity and not to mention hardcore confusion, at least for me. So it was definitely that moment at the very end where I thought to myself, okay, I think I know where things are going. And like every other scene we've played throughout this game, that last bit at the very end just says, you have no idea what you're playing. And
yeah, if anyone has played Superhot, I think that's like a very good analog for what this character looks like. Just take out like the red and orange and replace it with yellow and green, and that's what you get. I think that this is like I said, easily the best thing that I've played so far in Kentucky Route Zero, because the writing is on point. There are tons of themes that, like, depending on how you play, you can interpret differently. I mean, I fit and kind of stuck with debt and the American dream, and Mike started to like go into and unpack the religious aspects, because at one point, you know, I think Pearl keeps saying like, I'm just a good Christian woman, or is it Evelyn that keeps saying that? Either way, like, there's tons that you can take out of this, and the writing is so sharp. I mean, even the small things, like Evelyn was at the bar and she's like, I want to be free of being a parasite, and then literally asked for a drink 5 seconds later. So just fantastic. Yep. Like, I would, if you're curious about Kentucky Route Zero, I would actually download this first and thematically see if this is something that you'd be into before you dive into the game, because you can play everything out of order, and if you jive with this, you'll probably jive with the rest of the game.
This episode, or this interlude, reminded me so much of 30
Oh my
Flights
god,
of Loving.
yes.
Jacob, I don't know if you feel that as well. Yes, especially that scene on the rooftop of 30 Flights of Loving, where you're kind of at the wedding and the bottles are piling up as people are drinking more, and the view tends to wobble and get a little blurry. It's reminded me so much of that experience, but just way more polished and way more, literary, I guess, because in 30 Flights of Loving there's no real dialogue. I thought this was such a great episode, and I love the just mounting tension that builds throughout.
If people are interested in playing this, the one thing that's really cool about this interlude compared to the rest of the game is that this is actually it has the option to be played with a VR headset, because you are playing from the point of view of the barfly on stage. And actually what Cardboard Company had done at numerous other game expos and actually art exhibitions is that they actually provided sort of an interactive art installation with a VR headset where you could sit down at this bar table with an actual plated brick sandwich and then just mount this Amazing. VR headset and just, let the ride take you away.
I also thought this was so visually beautiful. Like the different, I think it was basically like time of day light that was coming through the window behind Harry and Evelyn and Pearl at the bar. Going from being, yellowish to being orangish red to then being, like a blue in the evening. I thought it was wonderful. Just visually so great.
And there was like even it looked like truck light that was passing like through, and I thought I remember hearing trucks, but that could have just been my imagination. If you don't like playing video games and somehow you landed on this podcast and somehow you got all the way through it, just know that you can buy the screenplay of this thing too. So many different ways to enjoy Interlude 2 of Kentucky Route Zero. Gentlemen, any more thoughts before we close it off?
I'd just add one of the other things that stuck with me, and I was kind of humming it to myself after I had played it, was that love song when Evelyn's at the bar and she's like, I just want to hear a love song, and there's that song that plays in the background, and I thought it was just so perfect. It fit the scene so well, even though I don't think you can hear any lyrics in particular. It has that atmosphere. And I feel like this interlude, more than anything, just drips in the atmosphere. If Hard Time Liquor or Hard Time Whiskey is suffocating in debt, they put the debt in it. This interlude is just dripping with atmosphere and just vibe. So hugely enjoyed it.
As I said before, I was left completely dumbfounded by the events that took place in this scene. But I'm not saying that was a bad thing at all. I was delighted throughout the entire. I will call it a performance because that's what it was. I was delighted from beginning to end, just taking pity on these characters and just seeing how the story progresses, and then at the same time in the back of my mind trying to figure out, okay, well, what's the point? How does this all fit into the bigger picture of Kentucky Route Zero? And I mean, I don't have an answer to that, but I will say that I am just extremely excited to see how the rest of this pans out.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the different threads that's taken from this interlude into the next act. As I'm sure we saw with the last one, into the act that followed it.
Agreed. And you can find our future episodes wherever you downloaded this one, or at leftbehindgame.club. You can find all things about our podcast on social media at Left Behind Club on Twitter and on Instagram at Left Behind Game Club. If you want to talk about the entertainment, which is easily, like we said, the best thing, or at least I said, the best thing that we've played so far, you can do so in our Discord. You can find the link to that on our website. If you want to find me on the internet, you can find me at Jacob McCord on all major social media platforms. On Twitter's where I do most of my ranting. If you want to watch a cool YouTube video, I've got those at youtube.com/Jacob McCord. Really, all things Jacob McCord all the time with that tag. Adam, thanks again for making your fourth appearance on the podcast. It was lovely having you. Great time talking about the entertainment. If people want to find you on the internet, where can they do so?
The best place for people to find me is at my website, adamiannetta.ca. It's my professional profile for my work as a singer, but I'm equally passionate about video games as I am singing, and just as well equally passionate about talking about great games with great people like yourself. So it's been a real pleasure chatting with you guys today.
And Michael.
Well, I'm going to blush through Adam's compliment and say you can find me most social places online at RuffaloM, or michaelruffalo.com. And in the Discord server. So feel free to hop in and chat through. We've got some awesome discussions and great deals that are being shared.
Michael, to close this interlude, what do we say to him?
And that, my friends, is one less very interesting interlude left behind.